This is Jamie Dyer welcoming you to another edition of the Quo-Cast. And I'm delighted to be joined by Tyrone Coates of the Bombers, who you will remember was the band that Alan set up in the late 1980s with John Brewster of the Angels. Thanks for joining us, Ty. Obviously, this conversation comes after the sad passing of Alan. Where were you, and what did you feel when you heard the news?
Look, indeed, it was shattering. I got the message on Facebook actually from Alan's daughter Tony, and she was obviously mortified by it all, as was the whole family, especially Dale. That they'd been married for so long, and they were just a wonderful couple and soulmates for a long, long time. So. It was an awful thing, and I know that it wasn't great for the last bit of time he had with us, but I know that the family rallied around and they were with him when he passed. So I guess, that was, I guess if there's a bright side, then I guess that would be it. But I just immediately started thinking about all the times we had together in the band, and the different forms that took over the years, and his guidance and mentorship, if you like. I was kind of, came over into the scene, and I joined him briefly in the Party Boys with John and Alan, and then we started writing, and we formed the Bombers, as you know. And he taught me a lot. I used to drive him nuts with questions about why are you miking up like that, and why are you only putting the guitar up at half volume, and just all of those things. I learnt so much, and he taught me how to play a shuffle, which is great.
Well, if anybody can teach you, it's Alan.
100%.
Yeah. Now, obviously, since then, you have formed your new version of the Bombers, which was with Alan and John's blessing.
Definitely.
That was a couple of years ago that you started that, and you've had the pandemic to deal with and other bits and pieces. It must have been interesting to kind of go back and revisit some of that material and that style.
Look, it was fantastic. I mean, it's always been close to my heart, obviously, and we've, since then we've done other things, and we've gone on different tangents. But just getting back and playing some of those old songs from those days, and having Christina, who was late Steve's wife, obviously getting up and playing, and she plays very similarly to Steve and using his guitars, and it was just a no-brainer that she joined the band. It was just fantastic, and we had a great rhythm section, of course, and we've got Caroline and my daughter up doing backing vocals. So it was a wonderful marriage. It was great. Everything worked really well. And then the pandemic hit. We did one gig, and the pandemic hit, and it derailed us for a little while. But in between all that, I guess it's a blessing, really, because we started doing live video clips of the old Bomber songs. So that morphed into doing a brand new album. So we got our heads together and wrote a bunch of new songs, and got that out here in Australia, and then we got picked up by Bad Reputation in France, and they released it over there, and that's sort of doing quite well over there, we're happy to say. But as far as live work goes, we probably, we're still waiting on things to pick up in Australia. The gigs are starting to pick up, and the venues are getting a little bit more confident with being able to book bands without having been closed down again with, restrictions, etc. So we're just waiting and just seeing what the next couple of months brings forward.
Do you find the people that turn up to the gigs when you do play, are they familiar with the original version of the Bombers?
Yeah, look, it's a mixed bag, but a lot of the old fans were there, and it was just it was an amazing thing, just connecting with them and just seeing some of those old faces again we hadn't seen for so long, and having a chat. It was really hard to try and catch up with everybody after we finished, but I guess that's par for the course. But yeah, it's just good to see so many people still love that stuff out there.
Yeah, well, there's so much great material to choose from, and obviously you wrote a lot of those songs with Alan. What was he like as a songwriting partner?
He was awesome. He was, considering what Alan had done, his achievements and his, the wonderful career that he had, even up until when we'd formed the Bombers, he was always very open-minded, and he never ever once said, "Oh, look, I know better than you, and I'm going to do it this way." He never ever once did that. He always listened, and was very interested in hearing my ideas, and I guess they were fresh or whatever. But the three of us, John and Alan and I, just had a great writing chemistry, and it was just wonderful. The ideas we came up with, especially sitting around John's little studio up in Castle Hill, and we'd have a break and go out and play billiards for 15 to 20 minutes, then come back in and do some more writing. And it was just a really nice environment that both of those guys provided. So yeah, it was great. It was a great time.
And a lot of that material appeared on the live album from 3 years ago that finally got released. I think it was sitting in Alan's garage for a long time. Do you remember playing that gig?
Oh, look, 100%. It was, we'd organised for a mobile studio to come and park outside, and it was just torrential rain. And there were times when the guys were sitting in the van in the studio, couldn't hear the band for the rain on the roof of the van. It was just so heavy. And the cables were in the gutter, and there's water running down over the cables. It was just, we were thinking, is this ever going to work? And, obviously it did. And Alan had that recording sitting there for quite a while, and then he got, spurred on to go and do something with it. And we had to be very careful when it was being digitized because it was an old tape, analog tape. Too many passes on that tape, the oxide starts coming off, so the tape and the recording would have deteriorated. But the guy that did it, I can't, just his name escapes me now, but he did a fantastic job and was very mindful of that when he did it, and just came up with a really great product that we're really, really happy with.
Yeah, and it's still available from Barrel and Squidger Records. That performance blew me away because I'd heard Aim High from, 30 years previously. Obviously, when that live album was recorded, it was recorded when John Coghlan was in the band. So you basically had Quo's backline behind you or beside you. What was John like to work with?
Oh, he was awesome. He was just a lovely guy, very laid back, and just a powerhouse drummer. And I remember we did one of our first gigs, and they had it was a little gig down in Melbourne, in the outskirts of Melbourne, a really small venue, because we started off just doing some warm-up gigs, and the people got wind that Alan and John, of course, were in the band, and they had this massive big banner said "Rock and John Coghlan," and it was just great, and he loved it, and it was just a really good vibe down there. And him and I hit it off really well. And, John's a lovely guy, and we obviously spent time, in that initial stages touring and a lot of time in a van, driving up and down the coast doing gigs. And it was just awesome. And it was, that lineup on that night, we got our record deal with A&M Records on the back of that live performance. Because when they heard that, they just went, "Oh my God, it just sounds so good." And it's warts and all. There's no overdubs, there's no auto-tune. It's, that's exactly how the gig was.
Obviously, John was replaced by Peter on drums. Did that make any difference to the record deal?
Look, no. Look, I guess the drummer, the drumming was just a different vibe than John's. It was more of a, Peter was more of a session drummer, a studio drummer, and John was a fabulous live drummer, studio drummer too, but his forte was live, in my opinion. And then Peter joined us, and it didn't work out. I think John, wanted to go back to the UK anyway, which he obviously did. No, it didn't. And the record company were fine with that. They were happy with what they heard from Peter, and Peter was very cohesive within the band and, slotted straight in. So it really wasn't an issue.
Excellent. I mean, that live performance, as I say, utterly blew me away. There was so much power and passion there, and especially like Steve's guitar. For those uninitiated, he was a master at what he did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, he was, and thank you. I appreciate your positive words on that, and it means a lot. But Steve was amazing. He was unique. There will only ever be one Steve. He was a very quiet, very humble man to speak to, but when he got on stage, he just unleashed the beast. And, the way he used to, work at the microphone stand, and in City Out of Control, he used to do a big spot there before John did his harmonica solo, and it was just amazing to watch. Sometimes I'd go off stage and just watch from the side of the stage and just go, "This is great. I could watch this all night." So it was a lot of fun. Yeah,
there's actually a video of that on YouTube, which is amazing. Because obviously, because of the scene and the time it was, there's not much video of the Bombers other than official videos and the odd sort of bootleg.
Yeah, look, there was a gentleman in Australia called Paul Leutze, and he was a big fan of the Bombers, and he's got all these videos that he's got a little website that he posts on, like, Legends of Rock here in Australia, and he posts these videos that, like, I'm just blown away that they're great and they sound really good, but it's technology back 30 years ago. So, it's just good to see some of those songs that never ever got properly recorded, or videoed. I know that Alan would be, stoked. I know that he saw some of those things when this gentleman, Paul, started releasing them, and he loved it because it was just bringing back the memories. And I'm sure he would, continue to love seeing that stuff come back. Songs like Shelter from the Rain, and which is an old Angel song. And I'd forgotten we ever did that song, and I heard it, and it just sounded great. So, I just loved the guys in the band and the way, especially Alan, would just button down that rhythm section. And him and John were great, but him and Peter Heckenberg were very good too. And, it was just so super tight, and it was just driving power the whole time. It's just awesome.
Yeah, well, regular listeners to the podcast have asked a few questions that I said I would ask you on the on this particular edition. Dan asks... he asks, what's your favourite song of Alan's that you like to perform?
That I wrote with Alan, or from the Quo days, or
just in general, like any song that Alan had something to do with in the writing terms.
I think World's on Fire would have to be one of my favourites, and I remember we wrote that together, and Alan had a lot of input in that one. I mean, that was one of our earlier ones that we did when the three of us got together, and I think that would have to be my favourite. And it's, quite poignant now, even, with the trouble that's happening in the world now, and you watch that video and you think, oh wow, it's quite impacting.
Yeah, there is a nice mixture of sort of, as you say, poignancy and just good rock songs in that catalogue of Bombers material. The one that comes to mind that's sort of a mixture of the two is Crime Investigator.
Okay.
Do you remember how that came about?
Yeah, look, that was a weird one. And it was, to be honest with you, that was never one of my favourite tracks. But so many people that came to the gigs, and they were saying, when are you going to do Crime Investigator? Because I haven't played sax for a long time. So, it'd take me a while to get my embouchure back again. But, it's just morphed into one of those songs that it just happens to be a favourite with a lot of people. And I remember we wrote that song at John Brewster's house, and the three of us up there, and it started off really weird. There was a chord pattern, and then I took it home and I thought, what am I going to do with the vocals with this? It was really doing my head in. And then I eventually came up with this idea, and then Alan said, yeah, great, let's run with that. Let's do, why don't you do this and why don't you do that? And before we knew it, we had what you're hearing now. So yeah, it's good.
Well, it is awesome. Everything sort of comes together nicely. And why did you stop playing sax?
Look, I think, why did I stop? I remember when I left the Bombers, I started doing some other projects on the side, and I ended up playing rhythm guitar. So I wanted to focus on that and just become a good rhythm guitar player. And now that's morphed into, doing lead as well. But back at the time, I just kind of let the sax go by the wayside, because there really wasn't a need for me to play it in the stuff we were doing at the time. It just wasn't saxophone friendly kind of thing. So, and that's probably the reason why. And I just didn't pick it up again.
So when was the last time that you would have played with Alan? Would that have been the mid-90s? Because I believe you played on his EP.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we also did some gigs with Lancaster Bombers, like when Alan went out and he was kind of fronting the band, and I ended up joining the band in the later stages, playing rhythm guitar and doing some vocals as well. So we did some of the old Bombers catalogue in the band, and we also did quite a lot of the Quo stuff, obviously, because that's what people wanted to hear, and it was relevant, obviously. So I'd say that those gigs I did with him, and also the recording of the Matchstick Men EP would have been the last time, yeah.
Yeah, well, I've got another question here from Ant, who asks, what songs, in addition to those on the recent live album, did they perform live back in the day?
Okay, good question. We did a couple of Angel songs. We did Alan recorded the Doors song Roadhouse Blues, so we obviously had that in the set. And we did Shelter from the Rain. I think we did Marseille, which was a big hit with the Angels, and I think they had a fairly decent sized hit with that in the States too back in that time. But mainly it was, I think we also did Fortunate Son by John Fogerty, because, I basically, formulated my whole singing style on listening to Creedence Clearwater Revival when I was a kid. So those are the ones that come to mind that I guess were really popular with the audience.
Yeah, well, it's always good to have a mixture of things in there. And obviously Alan had been in the Party Boys, and he'd recorded, he performed live a couple of songs from Quo. How much material from Quo did he bring into the Bombers? Like, were there any that were kind of left by the wayside that you didn't end up performing, for example?
The songs that the Quo recorded, or?
Well, just songs that perhaps he brought from Quo, because obviously you mentioned John Brewster and the Angels, and there were a lot of Angels songs in there. Were there any Quo songs that he maybe wanted to perform, but we didn't quite get round to it? Yeah,
we did we did Backwater, which was Alan's song, and that's just a great song. I love that song, and I loved playing it on guitar. That was a real buzz for me. And we did Roll Over Lay Down, which was just, I remember when I was a young kid, about 17, I just got my driver's license, and I was living in the country, and I drove to Perth in Western Australia, and it was my first time away from home on my own in my own car. It was just unbelievable. And I pulled up at this service station to get some petrol, and there must have been a band not far away rehearsing, and they were doing Roll Over Lay Down, and I hadn't heard the song before. And I went, what the hell is that song? It was just that dun 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 dun, and it just blew me away. And I immediately went and found out what the song was, and found out about Status Quo. But that was probably my first introduction, so that was really memorable for me. And we used to do that live, and that just used to kill it. Whatever You Want we did as well, and that was a challenge for me because my job was playing that intro on rhythm guitar. And, doing Rick's parts. I mean, Rick's obviously, he was one of the best rhythm guitar players known in the universe. And, having to learn those parts was quite challenging. But with Alan's guidance, and it was, fairly strict guidance, he was looking over my shoulder and saying, come on, you're playing that right. What's that note there? Make sure that C's there. And it was great. So we worked it out, and, and that was one of the favourites as well.
Yeah. I mean, the rock scene in Australia is immense. There is a huge scene out there. How did Status Quo, obviously when Alan was in it, how did they fit into that whole thing, in your opinion?
Oh, look, I think they were huge. And when I was still living in the country, before I actually moved to the city, I had a friend, and he was in a band with me because we were just, kids then. And he was a massive Status Quo fan. And we'd often drive to gigs, or just, we were hanging out, driving around in his car, and he'd always have Status Quo playing. And, one of the songs that really stuck in my head from that time was Rain. I thought, what a great guitar. I just loved that whole thing. And just the shuffle thing, and how, that boogie, I just really loved that boogie. And what was just an amazing experience is when the Frantic Four reformed, and I was living in the UK at the time, and Alan contacted me. He said, look, we're doing some gigs. Would you like to come along? And I said, of course, it'd be great to catch up. So Kaz, my wife, and I went along, and Alan and Dale, Alan's wife, were just so gracious. They looked after us. They came and picked us up and took us down to the O2. It's just amazing. They're just lovely people. That goes without saying. But and we just had the best time. But the thing that really stuck in my mind was just how tight they still were. No one plays boogie like those guys. It was just amazing. So yeah, I'll take that away with me, and I'll live with that memory for a long time.
A lot of Quo fans will think the same. The crowd in those gigs was immense.
I know it was, yes. And everyone was just so, it was just an electric atmosphere. Everybody was so excited to see these guys, the original four members, back together again, and just doing what they did best. And they just didn't disappoint. They were just unbelievable. Just loved it.
Did you speak to Alan after that? Did he ever did he want to continue with that? Or did he kind of accept that was that?
Look, Alan and I often spoke, on and off, but we didn't really get onto that. I didn't push him about it, and he didn't. He just said that it was amazing, and we often talked about how great the band was, and he said, yeah, it was lovely to get back with the guys, I guess, and maybe mend some bridges, and just sort of get that, get some of that stuff out of the way that might have been dogging them for a long time. But I think he really enjoyed the gigs. I think that at the end of it, he was, physically a little bit drained from it. So I think that possibly doing another tour like that might have been out of the question for him physically, but he was still, sharp as mentally, and we spoke often. And he had some songs he was writing still right up until the end, and he said, I wouldn't mind getting you to come and do a vocal on one or two of these tracks, which I never ever heard, unfortunately. But he was speaking about it. He said, oh, these songs are great, and there's a bit of interest with them. And so he was just passionate, he was just totally passionate right through.
Yeah, and obviously, with everything that had happened previously, the fact that passion still remained, and he was still as passionate. I actually spoke to Alan 11 years ago. I interviewed him when I was a new interviewer. I'd never really interviewed anybody before, and he was just so gracious. And I remember, I've got the recording somewhere of him, just allowing me to go off on these tangents and being very generous with his time, because I told him at the beginning of the interview, it'll only take about 10 minutes. 45 minutes later, we're still talking. And he did mention sort of wanting to do it again, which I thought was really, especially given at that time, that was just before Hello Quo and only a couple of years before the reunion tour. We weren't to know what was to happen next, and he was so kind of positive and upbeat.
Always. He always was. And, one thing I really loved about Alan, I guess as far as a musical career goes, it doesn't get much more of a pinnacle than doing a Royal Command performance. So you could almost forgive him if he was a little aloof or a little arrogant, but he just wasn't. And I remember doing some of those gigs, and when we first started with the Bombers, some of the smaller venues, there might have been maybe, 80 or 100 people there. And if anybody came up and wanted to chat with Alan, he would stop what he was doing and he'd go and make time. And it didn't matter who it was. He'd just go and shake their hand and, how did it sound? And, just ask them for their feedback. And these people were just like, completely blown away by it. And that's one thing I took away from, and I've always maintained that through my career. And I got that from Al, is that, always make sure you give people time, because, you were there once. He never forgot where he came from. And I really admired him for that.
Well, for him in the late 80s to basically start again and, form this band with John Brewster and yourself, and you ended up supporting some quite big bands in Australia, didn't you?
Yeah, look, we did. But probably the most notable one is we toured the whole country with Alice Cooper. And, the biggest compliment we got was when Alice and the guys would come out and watch us before, they went on. And often you'd see them down at the mixing desk just bopping away to our stuff, and we exchanged T-shirts at the end of the tour. And John Brewster and Alice would go out and play, 9 holes regularly on the tour, because, as you know, Alice is an avid golfer, and so was John Brewster. John Brewster is a very, very good golfer too. So the relationship there between, the two bands was just phenomenal. And we obviously signed to A&M, and we were on the eve of our tour to go to the US, and Alice asked us, how would we feel about touring the US with him? So, and of course we we're just over the moon about that. And then we had visas and everything was kind of underway, and then the rug got pulled out from under our feet because the record company changed, and we kind of, we got sent down the priority list because we inherited Polygram in Australia, but they had many other acts before us that they'd signed that they had to get away. So we kind of had to, wait in the queue kind of thing. And then, it was a time sensitive thing, and it just sort of, didn't quite happen for us the way we wanted it to.
That is really unfortunate. And it's one of those things, nobody kind of foresees that beforehand.
Look, and that's right. And, you could get all bent out of shape about it. But the thing is I think we all realised that not so much John and Alan, but the other guys in the band, we got to do some stuff that we would probably never get an opportunity to do again. Like we did Countdown, we did MTV, and we did, so many great things and so many great tours. We toured with Cheap Trick and, Skid Row and some of the other great big bands. And it was, playing on some of those big arena stages and those stadiums was just amazing. And without, Alan and John having the profile they have, maybe we wouldn't have got that opportunity.
That's an interesting thing. Can you elaborate more on that? Do you think perhaps their history in the music industry kind of helped them?
Oh, look, absolutely. I mean, it definitely, without a doubt, opened doors for us when we first got the Bombers off the ground. We obviously, as you probably know, we had Bob Young, who was Status Quo's tour manager and harmonica player. And he ended up being our manager out in Australia, and he'd commute often, between the UK and Australia. And he was a wonderful guy too, and very very knowledgeable. He just he had the right contacts, and he was great. And it was because of obviously Alan's contact that we were able to work with Bob as well. So there was just a lot of things happened that John and Alan, or Alan especially, was able to open those doors for us and create those opportunities.
And you got to do all that amazing stuff, which is great. But you had a career after that, didn't you? What did you do afterwards? I know that you did, away from music, you did martial arts.
Yeah, look, I did martial arts. I'd always done martial arts, and the things in the music business in Australia, we went through a bit of a flat spot in the early '90s, and I found that I had a mortgage and I had a couple of little kids, and I thought, I can either keep on beating my head against the wall for the next 5 years and making them suffer, or I can take this other opportunity and fall back on my martial arts background, because I got an opportunity to come up to join a club and do it full time. And it was fantastic, because I ended up having the opportunity to go and open up the club in Houston, Texas, and I spent 5 years there. And then I went and looked after the London operation for the club in the UK for I think 7 years. So I was gone about 12 years, and that was great. But I'd always kept the music thing up. I'd always, it wasn't a full-time thing, obviously, because I had the club and then the corporate thing, which the two sort of were hand in hand. And then we decided that we needed to come back to Australia, because we had obviously family out here, and those years you just don't get back. So we decided to come back, and I thought, look, I'm going to leave the martial arts, because my knees and shoulders were sort of, taking its toll. So I thought, look, I'm going to get back into the music thing. And I thought, maybe I'm kidding myself. Maybe it's a bit late. Maybe I missed the bus here. But we started putting together some acts, and everyone remembered. And then, it was just, Bob's your uncle, and we were doing music full time again. So it was just great. So I feel very blessed that I was able to do the two passions in my life and give them a good crack, like the music and the martial arts. So, I'm forever grateful.
Yeah, that is amazing. And obviously the kind of vocals that you do are very big. What was your kind of ritual for warming up the voice back in the day, and how does it compare to how you do things now?
Look, I used to make sure that when I had the opportunity, I used to run a lot. I was very much into fitness in the rock and roll band days, especially the Bombers. When we were on tour, we'd arrive at the next town, and the first thing I'd do is put my jogging gear on and go for a run, find an oval somewhere and do multiple laps of the oval. And often I'd try and get a little run in before I'd go on stage, and just, do because I had some opera training way back in the day, a long time ago. And some of the warm-up procedures that they went through, I'd employ those before we went on stage, so that when I got on stage, from the first song, my voice was warmed up, because often singers don't do that, and they get up and it takes 2 or 3 songs to warm their voice up, and that's where it can take its toll, especially when you've got a tour where you're doing 7 gigs straight, when you don't get a break. And I remember that first run of gigs, we did 21 gigs straight without a break. It was just like bang, 3 weeks. And it was brutal, but fortunately, because I had this knowledge about my voice that I'd gone and got lessons to learn about, my voice was on day 21 was pretty much the same as it was on day 1. So, that was great. I was very, very fortunate to have that knowledge to be able to preserve my voice. Otherwise, it could have been catastrophic.
Well, you sound in fine form on Man Down, which is the new album, recent album by Ty Coates' Bombers. Mm-hmm. Have you started? Well, you've started doing gigs for that, haven't you, to promote that?
Yeah, well, as I said, we started doing gigs, and then the COVID thing hit, so we haven't gone out since then because, like the venues are still a little bit cautious. I think things are starting to, ramp up now. So I'm hoping to get something, happening in the next, couple of months and get some dates in. But look, it's been well received and the guys did a remarkable job on it. We've just got this amazing young drummer and he's quite an amazing young man called Ryan Matheson, and he has his own drum academy, which he started from scratch. He went to uni and got his degree in music, and he has about 50 students and he does it full time. But when he's in the studio, he's just amazing. Like he'll one or two takes and it's done because he does his homework. He talks through what he needs to get done. And he says, do you want this? And do you want that? And how about I try that? And how about I try this? And you go, great. And he just nails it. He's just fantastic. And then, Mick Carter on bass is just phenomenal too. So it's just a great rhythm section. It's not, it's a little different to what the Bombers was, but it's still driving and it's still got that spice, which I love.
Yeah, I love the fact that on that album you've got the two tracks from the original Bombers that you've re-recorded. Is it No Danger and Get Up and Get It On, which to me, that song in particular almost sounds like a hybrid of Angels and Quo kind of coming together. And I thought it was such a lovely, almost like tribute to the original band to put that on the album, especially since it was a B-side originally.
It was. It's great you look at it that way. And it's always been a favourite song of mine because the lyric on it is just about, just not being negative about anything. And just get up there and get it going. Don't sit around and wallow in pity or anything. It's just like, life, you're going to be dead a lot longer than you're alive. So you need to live your life now kind of thing. And that's really what the song's about. It's just an uplifting song. And I remember when we were on the plane to Canberra was our opening night on the Alice Cooper tour. And we had a set, I think we had about 8 songs. It was just a fairly short set to open up for him. And we had another song, I think She's a Mystery, I can't remember what it was now, another song that was going to be opening song. And I just said to John and Alice, look, we've got to open the set with this, Get Up and Get It On. And it was great because John starts off with the guitar. And then, it was just like one player's in, then the drums come in, then the band kicks in, and then I come in with the vocals. So it was just like an onion, all these layers. It was just fantastic, and the people loved it. They'd never heard the song before, but just because of the way the song was delivered by these guys, it just went off. It was just great.
Well, Man Down is available out there. It's online. You can order it, can't you?
You can, yes. livingthedreammusic.com and just go to the shop and it's available in there. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, I will let you get on because I'm sure you're extremely busy with bits and pieces. But do you have sort of, when you think of Alan, do you have like one overriding memory or is it a mixture of things?
Look, I think I just used to love talking to Alan. And sometimes when you have a conversation with somebody, especially somebody who's, very accomplished or very famous, and, you'll be talking, all of a sudden they'll start talking over you. Alan never, ever, ever once that I can remember ever did that. So whatever I was talking about, he'd listen to it, he'd digest it, then he'd answer. He was just a lovely, amicable guy like that. And he just had these incredible people skills. When you see him talking to, it could be anybody. Like I mentioned before at the gigs, he'd talk to, the people that came to the gigs, and he was just a lovely guy, and, I'll miss him a lot. And he was taken way too soon. And, his accomplishments and just everything he stood for. He's a fantastic husband, a fantastic father. He was just, just a all around good bloke.
Well, his contribution obviously lives on as Quo continue and as you continue with the Bombers. I wish you all the best with it. And is there any chance of coming to the UK, doing some gigs in the UK?
Well, never say never. I don't know. Who knows what the future holds? I'd love to. I mean, I'd really love to. I mean, I'd love to do a tour with John. I think John's, winding things back a little bit with John Coghlan's Quo too. But I would have always loved to have. In fact, when he was coming out to Australia to tour before, I was going to be in the band with him, and that was going to be amazing. So we were going to be I was going to be taking, doing the Francis Rossi parts, doing lead guitar and lead vocals, but it didn't happen because things just went awry with a promoter out here, and it just didn't happen. So it turned out to be, it wasn't logistically possible for those guys to come all the way out to Australia to do the gigs. And I was mortified about that because I was so looking forward to playing with John again. and just catching up and touring. It would have been great, but it wasn't to be. But, you know.
When would that have been?
That was 2017, I think, I want to say. I think it was 2018. Yeah. But they had the dates and everything in, and I was, head down and tail up in the studio learning all the songs and all the licks, lick note for note kind of thing. And then about 6 weeks of that, and they said the tour was off, and I went, no. But, that's the rock and roll. That's what happens.
Maybe one day for like a one-off gig or something would be nice.
Yeah, it'd be lovely. It'd be great. I'd love to. I love the UK. I lived there for 7 years. I lived in Hertfordshire, just north of London there. And it was just they're awesome people. And you know what I love about the UK is the rock and roll audiences is when, those tiny little gigs you're playing where you got to duck your head to get in the door and, you got a tiny little area to set the band up in. The people just loved it. They just loved music and they really appreciated the live music scene. So I miss that.
Well, I do wish you all the best with the Bombers and your other projects. Thank you so much, Tyrone, for being on the podcast today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, Jamie.